Hi, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to talk about a game by the name of Dynasties. This is the German version of the game published by Hans im Glück, but I know that it's going to be published by Z-Man Games in English within the year. This is a relatively weighty, maybe a medium weight Euro game that essentially is an area control game, which has a unique I divide, you choose mechanism sprinkled throughout it. The game's designed by Matthias Cramer, who has designed some interesting Euro games over the past few years, such as Lancaster and such as Kraftwagen and Glenmore. So he's a designer, I think, who's coming on strong as a European designer of note. This game, it plays for 3 to 5 players, ages 12 and up, the box says, in about 90 minutes, which seems about right. I'm going to take a few minutes to explain the rules. There's quite a lot of them, and then I'll come back here and give you my thoughts on the game. Alright, so this is what approximately the setup of a 3-player game of Dynasties would look like. And at the start of the game, each player is going to get 2 special scoring cards, which will show them 2 cities, where they'll be able to score points if they assign family members to those cities. Each player will also get a number of action cards depending on the number of players. That'd be 4 in a 5-player game, up to 6 in a 3-player game. And the game does play 3 to 5 players. They'll get a supply of family members, which are all unisex figures, and they'll assume a gender based on where they're placed on the board, and one will also go up here on the scoring track. And then players will also get one of these goods cubes of each of the 5 colors available in the game. So this is a game that's going to play over 3 rounds, and in each round players are going to play these action cards to essentially try to spread their influence over the course of Europe, either by doing trading actions or by arranging marriages within various cities spread across the land, or finally by influencing nobles, which are represented by these tiles over here. And the basic turn structure of the game is such that each turn, each player will take turns playing cards until they choose to pass. And these cards are essentially look like this. So this is a Joker card, and you'll notice it has these 4 symbols. They're just repeated on the side. And each of these 4 symbols corresponds to an action. So this Joker has all 4 symbols, but most cards are not Jokers. They simply have 2 of those 4 symbols, as well as this yellow special action, which could usually be activated with a yellow cube. And I'll explain those in a minute. But as far as the 4 basic symbols go, let's see. So the actions would be to, this top one here is place a male relative in a district or a city, place a female relative in a district or a city, and you'll have to spend black or white cubes respectively to do that. This blue action would be to influence nobles, so you could choose one of these tiles, pay the cost under them, and then take their special action, or to send a family member to the port to trade for goods. And I'll explain how that works in a moment. But I'll first start by explaining the way that this assigning of family members to cities works. And essentially that's the main mechanism, or the most interesting mechanism of the game, because that will allow you to arrange marriages between your characters and other players. So the way that that's going to work is, on your turn, you're going to have to play a card that depicts one of those 2 symbols. So let's say I want to send a girl off to a foreign country to try and exert some influence. I'll play that card, and if I play that symbol, I could send them anywhere. So let's say I want to send them here to Milano, and I'll just zoom in quickly there so you can see the space more clearly. And you can see that on the left there's always going to be black cube cost, and on the right there's always going to be a white cube cost. The black is always going to be the cost to place a husband, the white is always the cost to place a wife in that area. So I wanted to place a wife, I would basically place my worker there, who's now designated as female, and that would return 1 white cube to the bag, because that's what's depicted here. Doing this has an immediate benefit, so you could see on this space that there's a 2-point marker, so I would score 2 points. And then it has several possible long-term benefits. First of all, anybody who's on the board at the end of round 1 or 2, and let me just zoom back out a little bit, will score points so 2 or 4 points, depending on the size of the space that they're on. So if they're on a small space, they'll be worth 2 points. Large space, 4 points, and they'll also score those points if they're still unmarried at the end of round 2, either 3 or 6 points. Secondly, if they're on the board at the end of the game, they could help you in a contest for majority. So each of these areas is going to have a random one of these scoring tiles placed on it, just to randomize the game setup. And whoever has the most family members, whether it's male or female, or they can have babies, and also number of crests for that country, which you could see here, and there's various ways to collect those, we'll get the top points, and in second place we'll get the second number of points. If you have many of these cities have crowns in them, so you can see this German area here has 3 different crowns. If you had somebody present in each of those cities, you would then also score the crown bonus, and any number of players would be able to score that theoretically. So that's why you want to send these people out. So basically to set up scoring opportunities for yourself. Some of the other special benefits that you're going to get immediately for placing are, if you place on a crown, you don't get anything, but you're setting yourself up for endgame scoring. Some of these spaces here have an anchor and a bag, picture of a bag with a number. That just means you'll draw that many goods from the bag at random. And those also have anchors on them. Some scoring cards will want you to be placed on anchor spaces, and then some have these books. You would just, if you placed a worker there, you would then flip the top book tile, and then some of these you'll have to spend right away. Some you could choose when to spend. So here, this would be a free placement at the shipping market. So essentially that's how you're going to place either husbands or wives to a given space. And it should be noted that you could only ever place a husband or a wife in a given city. You can't place in both spaces. And the reason for that is because, let's say I've placed this character here, or I guess I placed them down in Milano. And you can see, and I'll leave this up here just for the sake of clarity, you can see that I placed a wife there because she's on the right side of the tile. If somebody later here places a husband, they're going to get the 2 points also, that's depicted there, but then a marriage is going to occur. And the way that the marriages work in this game is that there are these 3 dice, which are dowry dice, and those are going to give you essentially rewards for arranging a marriage. And on each space, one side will be a smaller space and one side will be a bigger space, and that's not tied to gender. It's going to vary on each space, but whoever's on the smaller space, in this case the red player, will roll these 3 dice, hopefully not killing the newlyweds. And so these dice are going to have on them a number of different rewards. So here you can see these 3 dice. This one's 4 points. This one allows you to take 3 scoring cards and keep 1, and this would allow you to randomly draw 2 goods from the bag. And the person who rolled the dice, the person on the smaller token or smaller space, will then divide these up however they see fit into 2 groups. So essentially 2 dice and 1 dice. So they might decide that they really want, the 4 points and the good to be one group, and then the special card to be the other group. And then whoever's on the bigger space gets to choose which of those 2 things that they want. So let's say they take this, they'll immediately execute those actions, and then this person who's on the smaller space would get the leftover choice. So they would draw 3 of those scoring cards and then be able to keep 1, discarding the rest. So on these dice, this is essentially a 6-sided dice, so you could get up to 6 points on this die. This die here either allows you to get those crests, which essentially count the same as a noble in a country when determining majority scoring, and there's one for side of that die for each of the 4 different countries or areas, I suppose, and then just draw 2 goods. And then this third die has draw a scoring card. This is a free placement at the harbor, or this asterisk, which is essentially have a baby. And if ever you have a baby, you essentially will, let's say the red player took the die to have a baby, you get to lay down another person there or in any other space where you're married with, you know, two figures in a city, and there's still an empty space for one baby. And you just would lay down a figure like that, and again, this baby would be able to count toward the end-game majority scoring. So that is how the marriages are going to work in this game. I should note that at the end of round 2, anybody who's not married, you can see here, you will have to pay one of those pink cubes per unmarried person, or else the game says that they get sent to the convent and or the monastery, and they're no longer eligible bachelor or bachelorettes out on the board, so you'll lose them if you don't get them married off soon enough. There's no such cost for that in rounds 1 or rounds 3. That's unique to round 2. So that is the marriage part of the game, and that's a large chunk of the game, and now that I've explained that, I'll be able to explain the other parts of the game more easily. So the third action that I'll explain here on this, after the 2 marriage actions, is the ship action. And allow me to zoom in on that part of the board. So you can see here there are 3 distinct ships at port. And whenever you take this action, you will always assign your person to the larger of the 2 spaces, unless it's already occupied. So if I wanted to get some of these goods, I put my player here, then somebody else might go here, and let's say that this player goes here, and that's fine. Then later, as soon as a person goes into a second part of the ship, essentially onto the smaller space, then that's going to initiate a similar I divide, you choose mechanism. So the red player who's on the smaller part of the ship will get to divide up these goods into 2 piles, and then the player who's on the larger part of the ship will get to choose which one of those sets they want. So they might, for example, take the 3 cubes, and then the other player, the player who divided them, would get the remaining cubes. Then these would just get returned to the players, and 5 new cubes would come out. It's 5. So if ever also you would place another worker where you're already there, you get to essentially do a divide action among yourself. However, you only get to choose 2 of those goods to take. So for example, if I wanted these 2 white cubes, I would take those, add those to my personal supply. These would get sent back to the bag, 5 new ones would come out, and the workers would get returned to the player. So that is basically how this is going to work. One exception is at the end of the round. If anybody's left here, they'll get to choose 2 cubes, and then the rest will get cleared out as if they had placed 2 workers. But that would not happen until the very end of the round during the cleanup phase. Okay, and then finally the 4th action here is this depicted by this blue arch. And what that lets you do is it lets you spend blue cubes to influence these nobles. So they're divided randomly into 2 sections. There's this top section who could be influenced with blue cubes, and then there's this bottom section which requires special cards to be influenced. And I'll show you one of those just now while I'm explaining it. So here's an example of a card with a special power. So you notice, like I said, it only has 2 normal actions, but it has this yellow action. If you execute that yellow action for the cost that's depicted here, so 1 yellow cube, you would be able to influence one of these 2 nobles down here, instead of one up here, where you have to pay blue cubes. And that these nobles can only be influenced once per round. Once you've influenced them, they'll flip over, and at the end of the round, they'll get reshuffled. But what do? I'll just explain them all quickly to you. And you'll notice that just randomly, some of them will have higher costs or no costs. So this one costs no blue cubes to influence just the card, whereas this one costs the card plus 2 blue cubes. So, let me just zoom out a tiny bit. So these are just various, I guess, historical figures. So this is, I guess, Ferdinand and Isabella, and they'll allow you to arrange an immediate marriage. So, for example, if on the board here, let's say somebody already had one character placed here, you would be able to do another placement there to arrange a marriage, avoiding the cost to do that. This guy just allows you to draw 3 of those scoring cards, which I'll explain in a minute, and keep 1. This guy here, Jakob Fugler, I think his name is, he allows you to take, for every 6 cubes other players are holding, you could ask them to give you 1, and they have to do that. if players have less than 6 cubes, for each player who has less than 6 cubes, you get to draw one out of the bag. So it just gives you some cubes, but you don't have a lot of control over what color you're getting. This, I believe, is the pirate Francis Drake, and he allows you to take 1 cube from each of these ships, and the catch is that they don't get refilled till 5 until after players claim them, so it's going to be fewer cubes for the remaining players down there. This is, I think, Machiavelli, and he lets you do up to 2 placements of, husbands and wives in cities, but the catch is that you could use cubes of any color instead of just black and white cubes for husbands and wives respectively. But the extra cost of that is that you have to pay 1 extra cube more than what was depicted here. So for example, if I wanted to place in these two maybe this space here, this black space here, and this white space here, I have to play 3 cubes of any color here, 3 cubes of any color there. So it's just more expensive, but you have more flexibility. This guy here, I don't know who that is, maybe Galileo or something, and what he allows you to do is place a worker at the end of this turn order track, and I'll zoom out so you can see that. Essentially there's a turn order track there, so where I've placed that red worker, and that will allow you to take one of these extra rewards, which I'll explain in a minute. Those are given at the round end. This noble here, he allows you to roll the 3 dowry dice and take the benefit of any 2 of those 3 dice. And finally, this noble allows you to draw 2 extra action cards, which you'll be able to use to do extra actions during that turn, or to carry over to the next possibly. So that's what the nobles do. So those are the 4 basic actions that are shown on here. I know that's a lot to absorb, but the game is a little bit medium weight, I would say. So some of the examples of the special actions that I'll quickly run through are, for example, here, this allows you, like I said, to influence those 2 nobles who are in those 2 yellow spaces. And remember, at each of these nobles can only be influenced once, and you flip them over until the next round when they're reshuffled and refreshed. These cards here, and there's many of them, tied to the various cities, they allow you to spend the number of yellow cubes depicted to place into that specific city. So for 1 yellow cube, if I turned in 1 yellow cube, I would be able to place either a husband or a wife into Carcassonne. And I would ignore the costs depicted on that space. So the black and white cubes I would not need to turn in. This one goes with passing. I'll explain it in a minute. And this one here, for 1 yellow cube, you could place 2 characters down here at the various ships that are in port to claim more cubes. I believe I might have explained these already, but just quickly, these are 2, you'll start with 2 of these green scoring cards, and you could turn these in at the end of a round. You can only carry 2 of these over from round to round, so you might be sometimes forced to turn them in early, but these will reward you points for completing a placement in each of these cities. So for example, if I had just in either Lancaster or Carcassonne, this would be worth 3 points. If I had a figure in both, it'd be worth 10 points. And those come in various with various cities for the different players. So the final thing is, as players are going to be doing their various actions, eventually they're going to start running out of cards, and they'll choose to pass. And you could generally choose to pass at any point, the caveat being that of these action cards that you get, you can only carry a maximum of 1 over to the next round. So you'll want to generally take as many actions as is feasible during a round. But then when you pass, you'll do with this, basically this pink section of the board, you'll look at that, and I've zoomed in here. So when you pass, and this is a character, remember, that was placed here thanks to the special ability of this guy. When you pass, by default, if you're the first person to pass, you'll place your figure there at the start of this row, and then the next person to pass would be able to place there. But if you expend pink cubes, as shown on this track, you could essentially get higher in turn order and potentially be able to grab better bonuses from this area here. Each player is going to be able to choose 1 or 2 if you've exercised that noble. So for example, if I was a red player and I turned in 2 pink cubes when I passed, so I just would discard those to the bag, I'd be able to put my figure on this space here, which would guarantee me more turn order, or primary turn order, over anybody who did not pay any cubes. One thing is that these cards here, with this figure, if you turn these in as you pass, you could just take the highest unoccupied space, not paying any of the pink cubes when you choose to pass. So those are a benefit. So after every player has passed, let's say we have somebody here and somebody here, then that would initiate the end of the round, and there's going to be a cleanup phase where these are reshuffled. Anybody who's left at the port will get to choose 2 goods, and then there'll be this. Actually, first this. So first of all, the player who's furthest along on this track will become the new first player, and this is the turn order marker for first player, or the first player marker. It's this basket of roses, I guess, because there's so many weddings in the game. And then in turn order, or in the new turn order, players will be able to pick one of these special benefits. Any number of players can take this 3-point benefit. The other benefits are: take 3 goods at random from the bag, take an extra action card for the next round, draw 3 of these scoring cards and keep 1. This is essentially called the Casanova action, and what that lets you do is it allows you to perform a marriage, not using another player. Remember, you can never perform a marriage with your own characters. There's no incest in this game, which makes it perhaps somewhat historically inaccurate, but you would take one of these extra pink figures here, and there's 3 of those available, 1 per round, and you would just be able to place it, ignoring the payment costs in that area. And then, so for example, here I've done it over here in Carcassonne, and then you would get to roll the marriage dice and pick 2 of those 3 marriage dice. So that's this action. And then there are 2 other things that could alter the board state. So first of all, there are these here, which are essentially open cities, and you can establish one of those if you place on the space up here. And the way that those work is that you could place them into any country, and they'll count as an extra place where people are going to get majority scoring, or potential majority scoring opportunities in that area. And whenever you place one of those, you can immediately also place either a husband or a wife in that area, but you will have to pay the costs depicted on the tile. And then the last potential reward are these extra scoring bonuses, which are these crescent moons. And there's one of those for each country. Those are just first come, first serve. And let's say I claimed this one here, and I just need to get it in focus. You could see, hopefully, that this here would apply only to me. If I scored either first or second in majority at the game end, I would get 5 bonus points. And if I scored the crowns for having somebody located in every crown city in that region, I would get another 5 points. And I could score both of those as long as I would qualify. So this is just a way to bolster your scoring within regions that you suspect that you're going to come out ahead in. So again, this is just going to go for 3 rounds. I should take a minute to just show you some of these examples of these various scoring cards. So some of them will be like this. This is essentially in each area in France where you're married. You could turn in this card. If you turn them in round 1, you'll get 5 points per married person that you have in France. In round 2 and round 3, those points go down. Here, if you have the most, or you're tied for the most white cubes, you can turn this in for 7 points. This is if you have placement in every region. So these are very, very standard, I think, scoring mission cards. So this one, it's for each pair of those 3 things. So if you have somebody in a crown city, somebody in a book city, and somebody in an anchor city, that could be worth 18 points in round 1. It'll decrease over the course of the game, but you could score as many pairs of those as you have when you turn the card in. And there's a variety of these in the game. Here, for example, the number of wives that you have placed on the board, or potential wives that you've placed on the board. And at the end of the round, after we've done this, we'll move on to the scoring here. So again, I think I explained this already. You'll get points for unmarried men or women at the end of round 1, depending on the size of the space that they're placed on. End of round 2, you'll get those points, but you have to pay a pink cube for those people to remain on the board. I should also mention that pink cubes, 2 of them could stand in as a wild cube for any color. That's the only color that you could do that with. And then at the end of round 3, you will score the majority scorings as depicted on these shields, which I've already explained. At the end of each round, you'll only be able to carry over 2 mission cards, whether they're the starter green mission cards that show 2 cities, or these cards that you could acquire during the game. Any others that you'll be forced to play, and you can choose to play any number of them if you're set up for scoring opportunities. And like I said, you could only carry over 1 of these action cards per turn, or per round, into the next round. Unless, of course, you pick up this one when you're choosing your turn order benefits. So, that is a lot of rules, I realize, but I think that does give you a really firm overview of the way that this game works and the way that things link together in the game. So I'll leave it at that and say that that is Dynasties. Okay, so that is Dynasties, and I'm sorry that rules explanation went so long, but there's quite a lot of things to show you in this game, and I think that this game got me excited partially because of the designer Matthias Cramer, who's done some solid designs that I've liked, some that I've been less enthusiastic about, but also because of the publisher, which is Hans and Gluck. And they're a great German publisher, and they've been in the business for decades, but over the last few years, about once a year or so, they've published a Euro game that's about this level of complexity that has been, if not my favorite game of the year, one of my favorite games of the year. Some examples of those would be The Palaces of Carrara, The Voyages of Marco Polo, Russian Railroads, Helios. So these are some of to me, the best Euro games that are being published today, and I think that Dynasties is something that is worthy of that company's company, so to speak. It has this really unique mechanism where you're going to be constantly, dividing up things and allowing the other player to pick first, and there's some real tension in that, more so than in a lot of these area majority games. Also, the way that the game works with you getting these secret missions constantly and having to cycle through those keeps the level of tension pretty high, especially because you're only going to get so many action cards during the game. In a 5-player game, you're only guaranteed to get 12 action cards, so really rationing those out and planning your moves becomes super important. The game does have some luck certainly involved in it. If since each of those cubes is really restricted in where you're going to use it, they're basically just tied to one use each for the most part. If you find that type of cube to be scarce, your plans are going to require some rethinking. Also, those mission cards, sometimes you'll just get luckier with those, and sometimes not. So in the very first game that I played of it, I got all of my cards had special abilities to place in the Germanic region, but all of my green mission cards were to place in other regions, and that's just putting you essentially at disadvantage. But I still did fine the game, and it was still a fun game, but there is this random element of luck which might be intolerable for certain strains of players. I just want to mention that that's there, because otherwise I think that this is a really terrific meaty Euro game. It's not too complex, and I think that the game, it does play over 3 rounds. I think that by the end of the first round, players will begin to see how the various parts of the game work together. You have to acquire cubes to spend them in the various areas, and being first in an area usually gets you a better benefit, but you're giving up other competition in other areas. So just always being aware of what other players might be potentially doing is really important. Something that I noticed during the game from just playing it a few times is that when you're placing into a region with your prospective husband or wife, you definitely want to pay attention to what the cost of the other side of that marriage would be for another player. If it's prohibitively high, like for example 4 cubes I believe it costs to place in Paris, it might be a while before that person finds a mate. So, you don't want a spinster, especially because at the end of round 2 you have to pay for them, and that could threaten, your crown scoring, or it could threaten your area majority. So you have to plan for so many different contingencies. At the same time, the game really does encourage a weird form of, if not participation, almost diplomacy, which feels really thematic. The players who are going to generally do best in this game, I think, are those who are going to be able to set up the most of those arranged marriages, because even if you get, just the 1 die versus the 2 dice, you're getting a benefit that, the other players at the table may not be getting. So those marriages are usually mutually beneficial, which I think fits in well with the overall theme of the game. So overall, this is a game that, I really look forward to playing more. It's a game that I've enjoyed so far. I think it's perhaps Matthias Cramer's best game so far. If it's not exactly so far quite on the level of something like Palaces of Carrara, which is one of my absolute favorite Euro games of recent times, it's well in line with the level of quality of the other Hams and Gluck games that have come out recently. So those are my thoughts on Dynasties, and thanks for watching.